How important is it, though, for Zambia to start this conversation on restructuring its debt with the private debtors?
Maybe by way of a bit of background, right about 21st of June, Zambia sealed a debt treatment. It was a landmark agreement, $6.3 billion with bilateral creditors. As you know, that Zambia has been quite in the labyrinth of debt restructure, debt hamstrung, and it's manifested in so many ways. I mean, interest rates, instability, foreign exchange, and volatility. And it's also, caused Zambia constricted growth. So you know that there have been fiscal challenges in that regard, and getting a debt treatment on your bilateral creditors was actually a positive thing because of so much debt. Zambia has been unable to maximize its production possibilities, and the country has not been able to, to grow. So there's two portions of this debt. There's the bilateral one that has been addressed, and right now there's those discussions around MOUs, and it's very clear that Zambia has been given up to 20 years. So that's like breathing space, and then there's those savings of about 5.8 billion, and all that is money that potentially will go into the economy. But then there's another portion of debt, which is now the private credit portion, which is about circa about 6.8 billion. Okay, it needs to be restructured as well. So the importance of the restructure of this portion of debt is that, one, it increases Zambia's chances of growth and success, and it will also create further room, the same way that bilateral debt is going to create room and capacity for the economy to grow. There will be more money going into sectors of the economy. Now, the interesting thing about private debt is that it's the stickiest debt of all. What I mean is it's the only debt that is graded. So in that private debt, there's $3 billion of debt that's owed to Eurobond holders. Zambia has a credit rating. Right now, Zambia's credit rating is default. And because it's default, no one can give Zambia credit lines. And it's become very difficult for the government to get credit lines. And what they've done is they've now used the domestic money markets to raise any sort of financing. But that overcrowding effect is the reason why your interest rates are high. Is the reason why businesses can't get loans cheaply. So the restructure is important because the moment that restructure is done, then you will have your international credit ratings such as your S&P, your Fitch, your Moody's come in to reassess Zambia's credit rating, and it can improve from the default status to better, and then it frees up that space, and then you can have more liquidity coming into the corporates, and then your interest rates can eventually come down. So it's very critical that that portion is addressed. And you may be wondering, there have been questions that people have asked to say the exchange rate is always hitting 20, when will it ever come to 10, and things like that. So the stability that you should expect to see is one of the benefits of a restructure, because then you'll have a stabler currency. You won't see a lot of these swings up and there. So we've talked about foreign exchange, we've talked about your interest rates, we've talked about foreign direct investment. Like, people will be much more confident to bring their investments in Zambia, and the government will surely be able to have more money to go into your education, your health, and other sectors. And your foreign direct investment is definitely going to spur. I know it's been a lengthy explanation, but I thought I should probably just provide that insight for clear understanding, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. But also, just to double back onto the president, do you think it was necessary for him to engage the World Bank?
It was very, very necessary, because debt restructure is very complicated, and it's a complex process. It's not a discussion that you seal in a day, in a week, or sometimes it can even take months. Okay. So the interesting thing is, you will note that about 2 weeks ago, they signed what you call your NDAs, as non-disclosure agreements. So those are agreements that you sign when you're discussing, and you can't disclose things that have been discussed, because whatever you're discussing is very sensitive. I want you to look at it this way. The World Bank and the IMF, I would say, are the two largest financial institutions in the world, and you need their support. The same way they were very influential in supporting Zambia to get to bilateral debt treatment is the same way they become very, very critical. Maybe let me give us a little bit of insight as to what goes on when you're restructuring private credit. So when you're restructuring private credit, number one, this will not even be concessionary. Private credit has got capitalists. Capitalists look at the current market price of debt. So the discussion is, historically, from experiences, what I've seen is that you really need the support of your multilaterals, such as the World Bank, and it could come in various forms. Are you asking the World Bank to guarantee a portion to improve your pricing? Are you asking the World Bank in its capacity as the largest institution as well to speak on your behalf? All those are pretty much possibilities, but you definitely need the World Bank, you need the IMF on your side. And I bet the same way the World Bank are being asked, to assist is the same way the IMF definitely are being asked to assist, and other, multilateral banks such as your AFDB and all that, because all this happens within a financial system, and within that financial system, you've got various players. So it does carry so much weight to have the World Bank, the IMF, the AFDBs, and other multilaterals pretty much on Zambia's side to get that level of consensus, because all you are doing when you're running a structure, you're convincing people that you owe money, that you should be able to pay them, but in a different way. Maybe they need to lengthen the period with which you're asking to pay back, and you can get all those multilaterals on your side, then I think that it's in good stead. So yes, it is very, very, very.
Now, just to get a little bit more technical, maybe, how much in percentage would the private creditors maybe need if we were to meet a debt deal with the reflection to the same terms as government lenders?
Look, it's not an easy thing to say. And a negotiation at private creditor level, like I said, is driven by market prices. So first of all, we have to look at where the market is. So because this debt is in dollars, the most complicated and complex issue is, what is the price of debt right now in the world, looking at where dollar interest rates are, and especially that you are in a very chaotic environment where there are other things that are driving dollar interest rates, because your private credit is actually tied to what the dollar interest rates are exact. So the more chaotic the world is, the more expensive it is to negotiate a decent rate. And there's two things that can happen here. There could be a rift on the interest rate, and then there's also the aspect of how long can we take to pay. From experience, what I've seen is that Eurobonds 10 to 15 years. So the question is this the first time we're ever going to see a 20-year Eurobond? That's something that we are waiting to see, and can take any form. So it's very, very difficult. But all I'll tell you is that it's very different from bilateral debt, because bilateral debt can be concessionary. Concessionary is usually you're only going to pay me 1%. Now, most of those, with the 755.25%, that's when it was issued, but dollar interest rates have gone up, and then they also look at what your sovereign risk posture is for the country. And I bet that's the reason why the president is also calling upon the World Bank to support Zambia, because who knows, maybe the World Bank may provide a guarantee to Zambia, and when they provide a guarantee to Zambia, maybe pricing would ease. So it's a plethora of a whole lot of possibilities that are definitely being looked at. And sometimes I'll give you an example of what happened in Mozambique. When Mozambique was trying to restructure its Eurobond, what they ended up doing is they ended up offering collateral in cash flows coming from a gas project, which was going to go live in the next 5 to 7 years. And you can see that that is the only thing that made those creditors then come to the party. In the absence of that, they would have never gotten to an agreement. But for Zambia, what's the possibility? Could they be asking for cash flows into what would be coming in from potential mines? I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, we don't know. It could take any form. So, and that's why these negotiations do get very complex. And sometimes when you're negotiating for debt, somebody will tell, can you put something on the table? For example, if I owe you 700 million, maybe I'd be saying, of that 700 million, can you give me maybe 300 million? And then let's talk about the other 400 and then we can stretch it. That's negotiating. So a restructure in itself, by definition, is simply changing the terms legally and agreeing with both parties as to how you're going to extinguish the debt. So the debt doesn't go anywhere, but it has to be paid, but in a win-win situation where me who owes you should be in a position to be comfortable enough, and you who is owed should be in a position to agree and say, your terms do make sense. But like I said, private credit, the biggest complexity is that this is on market terms. It's not contrary. It's market terms, and market terms can be sort of very interesting because right now, I'll tell you, given the state of the world, is what is determining what the dollar interest rates are. And interest rates on the dollar side are expensive. So but really, really optimistic that we'll get to a win-win situation. I mean, if the official creditors were able to get that agreement with bilateral creditors, then definitely we should be out of the woods. But the only question is, how long will it take? You know, could it be this year? And if it's not this quarter of year, I mean, we're really hoping that it happens earlier. The earlier it happens, the better for Zambia in terms of growth, because markets also grow wary. You don't want to see your currency starting to be volatile and depreciating and all that, interest rates going up. It's a very complex arrangement, but the positive is that there is something that is being done about it, and we've come thus far. So let's just probably remain optimistic and supportive.
In conclusion, for those that are wondering, all these English words flying around, I know many people feel, once debt talks begin, once they're concluded, the economy should begin to shift overnight. People want to see a difference overnight. Is that a realistic approach? Because I know many Zambians feel, we've been talking about debt. They keep hearing this word debt and debt restructuring, but the economy doesn't seem to be changing, for their benefit. So once conclusions, once debt restructuring is completely done with, concluded, and, the government is happy, how soon thereafter should Zambians expect their lives to begin to change?
Pretty honestly, I think it would be very unrealistic to expect that the economy is going to, turn around overnight. Macroeconomic indicators take quite some time to manifest. We have to be a little patient. Let's look at it this way. Think of it as you are doing something that will benefit your children, that will benefit their grandchildren. You don't expect it to happen overnight. I'll tell you one for a fact is that the economy is in a far better position than where it was last year. So some of the other factors may look like they're really dragging, but it's a lot of moving parts. It's not only this debt piece, because even if you restructure it, the private sector still needs to come party and grow the economy. This is a sector that grows the economy. So we all need to do our part. We all need to think differently. So all I'll say is these actions that we are taking now, we'll look back 5, 10 years now and we'll smile how we decided to be serious about economic recovery and all that. So I can understand for the average Zambian, because obviously people want to see these benefits overnight. I mean, even I want to see these benefits overnight. But the reality of the matter is that macroeconomic indicators do take a bit of time. I mean, I love the fact that the Ministry of Finance has come out very open enough. If you read the medium-term expenditure framework, they've told you that growth is going to be 2.7% this year. It's actually shrinking from last year. But then afterwards, in the medium term, we're going to see growth get to 5% by 2026. And I know that sometimes these numbers don't make sense to the average person, because the average person is asking themselves, do I benefit of this economic growth in my pockets? Do I have money? Can I buy bread? Can I afford, to buy basic essentials? I mean, if I push a trolley for 1,000, I'm going to more than I got last year, So all these are factors that are in play. But I would say it's very unrealistic to think that change is definitely going to come overnight, because even when this debt is restructured, the debt will still be there. It has to be serviced. And because it has to be serviced, but the question is, what are we doing for ourselves as Zambians in this period that would have been given breathing space? Because we need to grow the economy. The rationale is that when you grow the economy, you dwarf the debt that you owe. So I think one thing that we need to focus more on is growth. So this restructure is just creating a conducive environment for the private sector to thrive. So the question is, how does the private sector thrive? When the private sector thrives, then they start to create jobs and opportunities for people, you know. So that's the piece that we need to sort out. And it's not going to come from the government. It's going to come from you and me. So I hope I have clarified that. It's not the easiest of answers, but I think we have to be realistic about some of these things. Yeah.
Well, I love I love the emphasis on how much more work we have to do as well as citizens of this country. Mutsungezule, the economist, thank you so much for helping us understand, the president's efforts in speaking with the World Bank.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
Thank you.